What is going on, YouTube land? And today we have another great guest here on the Movie Pope podcast. We've got another great filmmaker here, Luke Lidell. Yes, that's right. His name is Luke, and my name is Luka. So just feel free to start putting things in the comments. But before we dive in, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and let us know how we're doing down in the comments below, because we definitely do appreciate any interaction that you wish to have with us, even if it's negative. You don't like the sound of my voice? Go ahead and say it. I won't be offended. Well, not not publicly. But let's go ahead and dive in. Luke, how are you doing on this fine Saturday afternoon, man?
I'm doing really good. I just got off of a pretty intense 5-day shoot, so it's nice to just be relaxing.
Yeah, I know. I mean, well, talking to me isn't always relaxing because it's like, oh God, why is he asking these questions? I just want to relax. But I do want to thank you for taking the time to be on the show. Out of all the guests that I've had, I mean, you have a pretty active film life, I should say, because because every time I get an email from you, like, yeah, sorry, I've been shooting a music video or I've been working on a film project. So they kind of keep you on your toes, man, don't they?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely my full-time day job. I started making films maybe about 11 years ago, and
Okay.
I've kind of just learned every aspect of the process of making films, and just learned how to do it all myself. So I know how to shoot, edit, all the things, light, production design, but
Mhm.
but I prefer to write and direct if if I can, but always get that luxury.
So I want to start off. So obviously you didn't go to film school, or you didn't take any video production classes,
That's
right?
correct. Yeah.
Gotcha. How did you develop your love for film, and how did you hone your skills as a filmmaker?
So I got into the first film I ever made was actually a snowboard video. I was living in Colorado at the time, and they had a contest for like just making a snowboard video, and they had like a little premiere, and I ended up winning the contest, and it was like a $5,000 prize, so that was really cool. And then I had moved to Portland and started, or I had opened up a snowboard like shop there, and so that shop was like pretty wild. It was snowboards and records, and we started making clothing, and so I started like doing these kind of ads for the clothing, and so it was like started out with photos, and then it went into video, and I started making like short films with them, and that was kind of my introduction to filmmaking, and I just fell in love with it from there. So then I started filming, various little experimental films and music videos, and then got into it as a job. I've been doing it full time for like 8 years.
So when you started off, what was the first thing that you learned? Was it camera or editing or lighting or sound?
Um, it well, I guess I guess editing was the first thing I learned because in the making of that snowboard video, I'd shot a couple of the clips myself, but it was mostly other people's footage that I got, and I edited the film together. Um,
Okay.
and then I learned camera a few years later.
So so way back in the day, when I was studying filmmaking, the premier software that everybody swore by was Final Cut Pro, and
Mm-hmm.
then anything else that you used, what was it? What was the other? What was the There's just one software program that everybody kind of turned their nose against. I think it was like Sony Cyber something. You know what I'm talking about, right?
I have heard of it. Yeah, that was like in the early
That was like the one
2000s,
that
right?
amateurs that everybody said, if you use that, you're clearly an amateur. Everybody needs to use Final Cut. Did you cut your teeth on Final Cut, or did you use something else?
No, I started editing in Premiere very early on, so I've been editing in Premiere for like over 10 years.
So this is like before Premiere became what it is today, right?
Yeah, well, so I've been editing in Premiere for 10 years, and I did edit in something else that very first snowboard video because that was a really long time ago. I can't remember the program, but it probably was Final Cut Pro.
Yeah, because I know because I think up until what 7 years ago that Final Cut was was the de facto software that that all filmmakers used, and I think after 2017 or 2018 that's when people started migrating more to Adobe Premiere just because you had the support system of all the other programs like obviously like Photoshop and Illustrator and all that stuff. So when it comes to video editing, it's not so much that it's difficult to learn editing. It's just that it's a time consuming endeavor, right?
Yeah.
What was it like trying to learn how to manage your time and how to put things together? Because just speaking from experience, and pretty well too. I mean, it can you could start off at 10 in the morning, and you'd be done by like 11 p.m. at night, and you're just wondering where the hell did all the time go? You know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you get sucked in. It's always been to me like putting together like a crazy jigsaw puzzle because
Mhm.
it's so daunting at first when you have like all of these visual clips and all of these audio clips and you're just having to meld and mold and then you get a once you get your rough timeline in order, you can start playing around, with tricks and transitions and, trying to put a creative spin on it.
Gotcha, gotcha.
But it's
S
I was just yeah, gonna add there that, just especially, like, coming off of this shoot, it's just shooting is, I mean, it's more difficult, like, in a way than editing just, like, logistically, like, getting the good pieces in the field, and then you can bring it home and, kinda more take your time with it.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally hear you on that one. So you start off with editing these snowboard videos, and then you graduate to like um, was it music videos and experimental projects? W- what was it like trying to learn how to film? These different, I guess I guess genres for lack of a better word. What was that like?
Yeah, it's just really experimenting and a lot of failures. Just learning, by doing, learning what not to do mostly. When I was starting out, so and I mean, I feel like it's a constant process of that. I'm always, just trying to get better and learn learn from my previous mistakes of what not to do mostly.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I think the big mistake that anybody could make is they stop and say, "Well, I'm definitely an expert in the field," because as we all know, things are always changing, especially especially in the creative arts, whether it's film or music or whatever. There's always going to be something new that gets introduced. Like I mentioned before, I started off learning editing a Final Cut, but now everybody's like, if you want to really get ahead, you definitely need to learn Adobe Premiere because that's like the king. And who knows, maybe tomorrow might be a different software that everybody has to learn how to use in order to stay ahead of the game. So um so so you said you started off lear- learning how to be a filmmaker by editing. What happens next? What's the next thing that you kind of work on?
I guess I start transitioning into writing pretty soon on, and I just really enjoy creating a story to go after, and a lot of times, just like kind of a fictitious world, creating that. But that's kind of been the things I've been learning most lately is really concentrating on. Writing, man, there's so many like tricks to the trade when it comes to that and just learning about story structure and the beats to hit, how to write dialogue. That goes really, really deep. And so I've been just trying to really hone in on that because it all, when even if you're shooting a music video or a commercial or whatever, I'm always thinking of story. I don't want to just like shoot and edit random shots that don't like mean anything. So even if it's a very subtle story, I'm always trying to throw that in there. Um, because yeah, it all starts out with story. I feel like any piece of content, if there's not a little story embedded in there, like no one's gonna care about it.
So what was the most important lesson that you've learned, as you were honing your skills as a writer?
One of the more recent, just like little tidbits of information, and it's so funny when you just like hear like these like one word or something like pieces of advice, and you're like, oh my God, like that's so crazy. I never like put that together.
Yeah.
But one thing about writing, like good writing, is there's irony in it. So like there's irony in the whole story plot, there's irony in the dialogue, there's irony. So like if you think about your favorite movies or TV shows and like think about irony, it's like embedded in the whole structure. Anything decent.
Yeah, and that's something I never thought of because I mean, traditionally you think of like the three act structure, act one, the hero's at rest, act two, there's an and then something happens, and then you go into act two where you kind of get to the climax, and act three is the resolution. That's like the traditional story structure. Was that something that you were aware of, or did someone kind of make aware to you as you were learning your writing skills?
Yeah, I really wasn't aware of anything like when I started writing. And I think, a lot of writers will do that and not like necessarily seek like how to structure a script. It's a very specific thing, and no like idea for a script I think is good initially. You have to really rework it and know how to write in that format. Um, yeah, so it's just really learning about the craft, from so many greats that have like come before. There's so much to learn about it. But yeah, I was completely unaware. I was in an acting class about 10 years ago, and I had written my first feature script, and my acting teacher had pointed me in the direction of a screenwriting group here in Austin, where I'm living and from,
Hmm.
and and so I joined this group, and it's like all like kind of a bunch of like older screenwriters. They're like ghost writers and professional writers. And I had them read my first feature and they were like, this is not good. Like gave me all the like,
Yeah, yeah.
but, and I really like appreciated that. Like maybe not right in that moment, but afterwards I was like, man, like that was all such good advice that they gave me in hindsight. And then a few years ago, I had them read a short that I ended up making, and they loved that. So I was like, that shows some growth. And actually, tomorrow they're reading another feature I just finished writing. So it's really good and important to get instead of writing in a bubble. I feel like getting feedback from people that know the craft is just so invaluable because if you write something and you're like, okay, I'm ready to make it happen without showing it to people, it just isn't going to be as good if it was picked apart by people that know screenwriting.
Now, do you normally write by yourself, or do you write with somebody else, or do you collaborate?
I do write by myself, but I like, yeah, I want to hear all of the feedback. I think, I don't want to be too precious or emotionally invested where I can't take the feedback from it. I want it to be picked apart.
Yeah, and that's a common theme because I remember chatting with an art director probably a few weeks ago,
Mhm.
and he was telling me about how how before production starts they will spend weeks just building these sets, and some of them can be very elaborate and beautiful, but when it's time to to strike the set, I mean, it just comes down really quickly. And I asked him, do you feel like, do you take it personally that you have to, tear down something that you've spent weeks putting up? And he's like, no, I mean, you can't be that attached to it. It's just a set. And like, and the same kind of applies here, because even though this is something that you've worked on, you kind of put your heart and soul into it. At the end of the day, you kind of have to detach yourself from that script, because it's not really your script, if that makes any
Right.
sense.
No, totally. Yeah.
So
Mm.
so in the writing process, where do you draw your influences from? Do you like watch a lot of movies, or do you read a lot of books, or do you just like take things that happen to you in real life and just put them on paper? What does the process look like for you?
Yeah, I don't know. I have a lot of ideas for stories, and I don't know where a lot of them come from. I think this last feature that I just finished writing, the initial idea came to me in a dream, like, oddly enough. But I love movies, so I watch a ton of movies. I should read more fiction,
Hmm.
in the genre I like to write in, which is sci-fi. But I tend to read more nonfiction, so I'm reading like a screenwriting book right now that's really good called The Secret of Story. So like I'm always reading like some nonfiction, trying to just usually having to do with filmmaking or screenwriting.
So see, that's fascinating,
Mm.
because you're the first person I've spoken with who actually enjoys science fiction. Can you talk about what is it about sci-fi that kind of draws you in? Because most people that I talk to, they'll say something like horror, or rom-com, or whatever, and there's like a specific thing about it that just makes them want to work in it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
what is so what is it about the sci-fi genre that just makes you think, you know what, I I dig it. Like, this is my thing.
I think what it is I like exploring like weird ideas that could be possible in the future. And I feel like sci-fi just allows you to do that. It allows you to explore really strange scenarios and introspective things, technology, simulation, things to do with time. Um, all of those just kind of oddball ideas that you can think of. I'm also like a space nerd, so
I was actually gonna be my next question. Like, what sort of subgenre of sci-fi are you into? Because sci-fi is just like this huge, like, tent that's full of things, everything from Star Trek to Doctor Who to Star Wars to like Dune. Well, now, the Dune universe now,
yeah.
and everything in between. Um, it's funny because I was watching Crank, High Voltage, last night, because my friend and I, we did a review of it earlier today,
Oh, cool.
and you would never think that Crank High Voltage is a sci-fi film, as trashy as it is. But I mean, if you think about it, there are elements of sci-fi in it, especially at the end where you see Ricky Verona's head in like his tank and it's being kept alive. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I know there's like a lot of my favorite movies when I was a kid too, like I never thought were sci-fi, like Jurassic Park or
Yeah.
Hook, like those, you know, but they're, yeah, totally sci-fi. They're like a little more based in reality, but yeah, I love those are just the kind of things you can explore. But I guess like this subgenre I've been like exploring some is a lot with simulation. So like
That's kind of appropriate, especially given right now with the whole AI, concerns and all that stuff.
right. Yeah, it's kind of freaky, like, maybe in the future, like reality is just this less or it's, I guess, a more, subjective thing.
It's kind of like what you would see in the Matrix, or even the Creator. I know that was a pretty, well, I wouldn't say disturbing, but it's a bit unnerving, because even though it wouldn't really happen, there's a possibility that it could happen. So
Yeah,
um
totally.
So I want to shift gears a little bit. So
Yeah.
you've been a filmmaker for well over a decade now. Can you talk about any past or current projects that you're working on? Because like I said at the beginning of the episode, I mean you're a very busy guy and you're always working on a project. So maybe talk a little bit about that and maybe go into details about the process of how you kind of get these projects off the ground, because I know that can be very difficult sometimes.
Yeah, sure. And I'm always learning about it. The business is definitely like a beast, and there's no real, you know, correct or like one path on how to get a project off the ground. But so the project I just wrapped on was actually a series of 5 music videos that we shot in 5 days. So it was essentially like 5 short films in 5 days, which was insane, but it was a lot of fun. And it was this really talented young artist that signed to Universal, and we got very creative on it. So we pretty much had, I mean, we had like done a lot of pre-production. We had like 10 maybe meetings with Universal before we even started shooting about like concept and, you know, wardrobe and, locations and all of that jazz. But we also, because of the artist and who she was and how she wanted to present herself, had so much creative reign to just try weird ideas. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. And then right before that, I was on a project as a production designer that was a film set in the 1970s. So I've been diving into, like, when I'm not directing on set, if I'm on someone else's set, I've been getting into the art department. So usually production designer
That's
or
so freaking weird because I recently interviewed an art director.
oh, really?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a fun job. I like the art department.
So how did
Um,
so sorry to interrupt,
no worries.
but I do want to ask you, and I asked John this when I had him on, but can you like talk a little bit about what you do in the art department and how you got started?
Yeah, the first thing I did in the art department was set deck, and it was on a Warner Brothers backed feature that Warner Brothers. I bought some smaller like production company. I forget the name of it, and they were producing a film in Texas, and so I got on that as a set deck, and I'd never done that before, but it just kind of made sense for my brain, and then. Yeah, I just started hopping on other projects as set deck, and then I just in the last few jobs I started getting production designer jobs.
So
Mm.
so can you talk about how you about the learning process in in being in the art department, because there's just so many details that you kind of have to pay attention to, but at the same time it's not something that you can just learn out of a book. It kind of, like John said, you kind of have to have an eye for design. So maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I guess you do have a little bit of like an eye for design and taste and like building a world, because even if it's based in reality, you're still building that world, even if it's like a mundane, like someone that just goes to a 9 to 5 and lives in a very stark apartment, like that's still building that world of starkness. So just thinking about what the story is and what those characters are, and then like what what pieces would be great to have in there, what pieces you could do without, and then just like logistically, like how it's going to happen. Our department is huge, like when it comes to logistics, because it's a lot of just moving crap around, buying crap, finding old cars. So I use Facebook Marketplace a lot, like, and when it comes to like finding set pieces and just tracking things down.
Yeah,
Mhm.
because usually the director or someone at the top will say, I'm looking for this, when for the set, and then being in the art department, you kind of have to go out and try to find something that matches their vision. How much I mean, how much input do you have or not have in that creative process?
Mm, yeah. I guess it depends all on the film and the director. Um I feel like usually the directors, if it's like a decent budget thing where, like all the jobs are filled, they have so much on their plate that like they're pretty trusting of the production design team when it comes to like choosing things. I mean, sometimes they'll have input about, just something that they don't like, probably, like if something sticks out to them that they're like, no, like let's get rid of that, then, you know, it's like, okay, that's fine with me.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, when I'm on someone else's set, it's definitely about making them happy. But usually they're pretty trusting of the art department because they've already presented the look and the feel of what they want in pre-production. And so, yeah, ideally the art department can execute that pretty closely.
Yeah, and I sort of got that sense when I spoke with John also, because for the most part, you kind of have free reign, but at the same time you kind of have to operate within the parameters of what the director wants, because
Mhm.
obviously, yeah, because obviously if a movie is set in the 70s, you don't want to have your set look like the bridge of the Enterprise, for instance,
Right.
right? Um, but but other than that, I mean, yeah, you definitely want to, you know, you definitely have free reign, but you definitely want to stay within the boundaries. So so you said that the project you're wrapping right now is a series of 5 music videos.
Mhm.
What do you have? I mean, I mean, what's next on your plate? Like, do you have anything planned, or is it kind of just like a lull, kind of just you know decompress for a little bit, or what?
I wish. I'm like going to be editing all of those music videos, and I'm glad they don't need them all at once. But the first one will be released like in a month, and then
Oh
one
wow.
one one the month after that, and after that. Um, so that'll still be on my plate for a while, and then I'm production design on another film that's coming up in May, that is just kind of like an art house feature.
This is in the Austin area.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Eh,
So are most of your projects, most of your work is in the Austin area?
It is, yeah. It's growing a lot. Me and my wife did live in LA for a bit, and I did do some work in LA while we were living there, but I'm from Austin, and I just have a lot of film connections here. And because so many people are moving here, the industry has really been growing on that music video round. I was looking for an AD, and I hit up like 4 or 5 of my old friends to help me AD, and they were all booked on other projects. And I was like, amazing, that's so awesome
Yeah.
that people
But
are
at
like
but
working.
at
Yeah.
but at the same time you're like, damn, like come on, guys, help a brother out.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't blame them.
So so I had another guest on recently, and he lives in the Austin area too. And I was asking about the Austin film scene. Now you mentioned just now that the Austin film scene is growing. Can you maybe, if you're able to, please do so, and if not, I understand. I mean, are we starting to see more of the Hollywood studios, or more of the Hollywood business kind of migrate to Austin? Because we know with California things are kind of falling apart politically, economically, and socially. And we won't get into that, but needless to say, states like Texas and Georgia, are winning out. So is that something that you're seeing in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, I think so. Like along with yeah, like you said, a bunch of other places, but it seems like it just doesn't make sense financially for most people to shoot in California anymore because they're because of the tax reasons. If you're shooting in these other incentive states, you're going to save a quarter to a third of your budget by doing so. So it is migrating a lot of out of Hollywood. They're shooting in Canada a lot. I have
Yep.
a friend right now. He runs Millennium Entertainment, which is a huge production company, but they're shooting something in Toronto right now.
Really?
A lot of
Holy.
Hollywood productions have been shooting in Toronto and Vancouver.
Yeah, I know about Vancouver because I know Arrow and The Flash, and I think Supergirl, they were filmed in Vancouver.
Okay.
All those shows, and then I think the most recent season of Star Trek: Brave New Worlds that was filmed in Toronto also.
Oh, nice.
Um,
I didn't know that. Yeah,
yeah,
I think they have some huge studios in Toronto.
and like you said, I mean, it's probably just due to the fact that the tax incentives are a lot lower over there than they are in California.
Mhm.
Are you? I mean, are you seeing anything kind of like popping up, over the past few months or years in Austin?
Yeah, so they're building two massive film studios right now, and so they should be open and operational by next year. But one of them is about 30 minutes outside of the city in a town called Bastrop, and it's on like 500 acres, and they're building like I think 10 or 12 just like massive studios. So it looks like a mini Warner Brothers lot. And then the other one is in San Marcos, which is like 45 minutes south of Austin, and that one is going to be the biggest one in Texas. And yeah, it's just like another massive movie lot. So I think those two are going to change a lot, things a lot, and they also so like Texas was one of the very first back in the late 80s, early 90s to offer really good tax incentives, and they were kind of the best for a while, but then legislation kind of turned around, and it wasn't as good, and places like Georgia and New Mexico and some of these other southern states had better tax incentives, so production went there.
Yeah.
And but Texas legislation just passed, because I think it was like at 80 million in the last term, and they just passed like another 200 million, so it got a lot better
It was
recently.
pretty aggressive because I read the numbers because I live here in North Carolina
Oh, okay,
and
nice.
we yeah yeah and as everybody knows, like Wilmington is like well, it was until a few years ago Hollywood East.
Really?
um because we had those big studios in Wilmington. I think one of them was where they filmed Iron Man 3. But over the past few years, like the tax incentives that we had were pretty paltry. Um,
Mm.
so when I read what Texas was doing, I was like, God damn, like these guys, like whatever they're doing, we need to match them because I mean they're going to be. I mean it's bad enough that Georgia was stealing our thunder, but I mean I mean with the way things are, if you guys keep up this competition, I mean you guys might put Georgia out of business at some point.
Man, I didn't know North Carolina was like big in movie making. I had no idea. I know how beautiful it is, but that's
Yeah. It was really big back in the 90s and early 2000s
okay.
because and we're both born the same year, so we kind of grew up in that generation where if you went to middle school or high school, every girl was chatting about One Tree Hill or Dawson's Creek, right?
Oh yeah.
And both of those shows were filmed in Wilmington.
Okay.
Um, so so that period from I want to say like maybe like 91 or 92 up until maybe like 2010 ish, we were doing pretty good because we got a lot of production rolling in. But then afterwards, things kind of started to peter out, and then we had that infamous bathroom bill that everybody kind of went nuts over, and that kind of spelled the end for the North Carolina film industry.
Okay.
And that's when Georgia stepped in, and now all of Marvel's movies and TV shows are filmed over in Atlanta.
Yeah.
So so the frustrating part is that most people who would otherwise be working in film in Charlotte or Greensboro are now having to drive 2 or 3 hours south to work over there. Do you which leads me to another point. So so with this growth in the film industry in Texas, is it exclusively in Austin, or is it sort of like expanding into other cities like San Antonio or Dallas?
Dallas does seem to be the second biggest to Austin. I think they do a lot of commercials there, but Austin does seem to be the biggest hub in Texas for it. I talked to a lot of other, mostly the people I talk to that are coming from other cities are actors. They're coming from, they're traveling either from Houston or San Antonio or Dallas to come, like I would see them in Austin because like that's where they're getting the work, and so they travel like to Austin from these other places.
Gotcha,
hmm
gotcha. What about from other states?
Um, well, I guess on the bigger productions, it's you know how it goes, where it's like they bring in the main talent from LA, and then they'll on the like really small supporting roles they'll source local talent. So that's pretty much what it is here.
Okay, gotcha. So so I want to kind of move back to filmmaking.
Sure.
So so you said that for the next few the next few weeks or next few months you're going to be editing your 5-part music video, or sorry, your miniseries of music videos, and you also mentioned too that you've been writing several feature films. Do you what does the rest of 2024 look like for you?
Yeah, I think you know, besides, like just jobs picking up, which, the music video thing is a great project, but it's someone else's project, so it's a job to me. Like as far as what I'm trying to learn how to do for myself is, I've been really diving into the business side of filmmaking because I want it to be a viable career, and I think what I'm learning, is just how important marketing and distribution is, for your film. So like thinking about that even beforehand, um, before you like ever shoot something, because I feel like a lot of us as filmmakers were so gung ho about making the project, but then afterwards we're not as gung ho about getting it out to an audience to let them see it.
Yeah.
which is sad, and I'm just wanting to kind of make that switch in my head, because yeah, with this next feature, I'm hoping to raise like around $1 million to get it made, and it's because it's really high concept sci-fi, and I mean, still that's a pretty low budget to do that with, but I think I could do it well for $1 million. But then I've been like, I heard the other day about like get when the movie Get Out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So they made that movie for $5 million, and then they spent like 40 million on marketing, which is nuts, right? But
I mean,
like,
that's mind-boggling. Like,
yeah, yeah. So like, you almost like just want to consider that in your budget. You almost want a marketing budget that's just as high as your filmmaking budget.
but
So
yeah, but you also don't want to be in a situation where you kind of have to sacrifice, the product for, for the pitch. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, totally. Yeah, so it's a balancing act for sure. And then but yeah, I'm just starting to really dive into the instead of going the self-funding route, or like you know just hoping like someone is going to write you a check to make a film. I'm getting starting to get pitch decks together, and you know just trying to go about it the best way I can figure out how to get like a decent budget to make a film.
So, at what stage are you are you at right now? Like, are you like writing proposals, or have you started? Because you said you started putting pitch decks together. Have you kind of like started like prospecting who to reach out to kind of get funding? Where are you at?
Yeah, well, so I'm just in the finishing stages of kind of tightening the bolts on this script, and that's why I'm about to have it read by all those professional screenwriters. So after I feel like the script is like kind of had, I mean, it's never completely finished, right? You're doing rewrites sometimes even like on set, but
Mhm.
just to where it's in a really tight spot where I'm comfortable showing people. Yeah, I have some potential people to reach out to, and um, just getting like the proper tools that like a pitch should have. Just like having the log line really tight, the synopsis really tight, being able to connect that story to the person you're pitching it to in the right way.
So so are you able to give any details about what this feature film's about, or just gonna play it close to your chest, or?
Sure, yeah, I can give a little brief synopsis. It's a really wild concept, but essentially it's in a post meteor struck in Earth world,
Okay.
a- and this a lot of the humans that have survived have gone back into living in simulations. And so this one guy is tasked to like basically enter into their virtual worlds and extract them out. And so the main character, he is entering into people's simulations, like, and there are all these different crazy, fantasy type simulations that he's entering into. And yeah, there's a lot of twists and turns throughout the story, but he ends up falling in love with one of the people, and um I guess I'll give a little bit of a spoiler, but he does find out that he like was a robot created. He's a robot created in a lab to do that job. And yeah, I won't give away too much of the ending.
Oh no, you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so it's sort of like sort of a little bit like Matrix meets Fallout meets the creator in a way.
Yeah, something like it kind of feels like maybe like Blade Runner 2049 meets The Matrix, kind of something in that, or Ready Player One. Yeah,
Yeah. No.
something in that realm.
Yeah, and you know, and to add on to that, I mean, we are living in a post-apocalyptic world as well, so that kind of gives it that added edge. So Luke, if anybody's interested in learning more about you or just checking out your work, where can they go?
You can go to my website. It's radruckus.com. That's Radruckus. And that's my Instagram handle as well. Yeah, I mean, and my email and phone number on my website. But yeah, if anybody has an idea or wants to collaborate, please reach out.
Excellent. So Luke, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be on this podcast. But before we sign off, we've got to ask you this just because we ask everybody. What's your favorite movie or TV show that you've seen recently that you just want to give a shout out to?
Oh man, recently. So something new I've seen, not something old.
Well, I'll preface it like this. So if you watched, let's say, for instance, The Matrix,
Yeah.
the original Matrix, from the '90s, but you watched it like last week, you're allowed to, give a shout out to that.
That's hilarious because I actually watched it last week. I mean, that's one of the best movies ever. But let me think. Let me just think for a second. What did it? I mean, I did just watch Dune Part Two pretty recently, and that was incredible. I mean,
Hmm.
what Denny's doing in the sci-fi world is absolutely insane.
We actually did a
Um,
review of that on the channel, by the way. So check that out, y'all.
oh, sweet. That's awesome. I will check that out. But yeah, I'll give a shout out to my favorite movie of all time, which is Braveheart. I think it's just an epic story.
Even though it's quite cheesy and historically inaccurate.
Sure.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times like I go into YouTube and in my feed there's a historian who says here are the things that Braveheart gets wrong. I'm like, okay, this is starting to get old, man. Like I get you guys are historians and you guys are passionate about your stuff, but man, you gotta lay off of Braveheart. I mean, come on, man.
Yeah, it's all. I mean, you have to embellish the story a little bit.
I mean, what's so fascinating about about that is is apparently a lot of it's based on legend or these stories that were written years after William Wallace died.
Mm.
And a lot of the things that they take kind of liberties with, like the kilts and the woad and all that stuff. I mean, from a filmmaking standpoint, I can sort of understand why you would do it. It's because you want to be able to differentiate between, the English who are dressed one way and the Scots dressed another way. It's kind of like, if you watch The Patriot, like, who the British are because they're wearing red coats, as opposed to the Americans who are wearing blue coats, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So in a way, it's kind of like they're, them, the Scots dressed the way they are. That's kind of like their uniform. You know who they are. Did you ever see that movie, The Outlaw King, with Chris Pine?
Yes, I really enjoyed it. I don't know about you. It was pretty
Oh, I
brutal.
loved it.
You
I
did?
loved it.
Okay. Yeah. I was just about to say that because that was like basically the follow-up story to Braveheart.
Because I mean, because think about it, like he's playing Robert the Bruce, right? And
Right.
he's fighting against Edward the First, and that final battle scene. Oh my God! Like, I mean, it's just phenomenal. Like the way it was set up and formed, and I'm sure as an art decorator, or sorry, as an art director, you probably appreciate the direction that they were going in.
Oh yeah.
Just because
Yeah.
just because everything from the costumes, like to the way that they had the trenches dug in the marsh. I'm like, oh man, like they really cared about their history, dude.
Yeah, totally. And it was, I mean, it was brutal back then. So I definitely like appreciating medieval pieces when they don't like try to make it too like, romanticized and glamorous looking because it was gross.
Yeah. Kind of think Game of Thrones, right? Like
Yeah.
it's kind of like that old argument of like which is more authentic, Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings, right? Because Lord of the Rings is more, like you said, it's more of like this romanticized, stylized version of the Middle Ages, whereas Game of Thrones is more like, yeah, this is what it was really like. Get people pissing on the street, knife fights, and everybody's backstabbing one another. So
Yeah, totally.
all right. Well, Luke, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be on our show, and I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to watch. And if you're enjoying the material, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
Thank you so much, Luca. Bye.
Yep.